KJA Global Channel. The Political System and Me. Series 4. The Political System Across Every Sector of Society. Episode 44. Environment and Climate, Survival Governance, and Intergenerational Duty. I used to think the environment was scenery. Mountains as beauty. Forests as distance. Rivers as background. Rain as weather. Heat as inconvenience. But the environment is not scenery. The environment is the operating system of life. And climate is not merely a debate. Climate is the timetable of survival. When air becomes unbreathable, politics becomes medical. When water becomes scarce, politics becomes conflict. When floods rise, politics becomes displacement. When drought spreads, politics becomes hunger. When forests disappear, politics becomes collapse. This is where our question begins. Can a political system govern beyond appetite, convenience, and short-term power? Storms become debt, loss, migration, and grief. Pollution becomes disease. Soil failure becomes food insecurity. Coastal erosion becomes relocation. Heat becomes danger for workers, children, and older people. The environment is therefore one of the most political realities on Earth. It determines whether a nation can continue at all. The environment does not vote. Rivers cannot protest. Forests cannot sue. Future children cannot stand before Parliament and demand justice. The political system must therefore become their voice. The system reveal is environmental governance and intergenerational duty. Environmental governance is survival governance because decisions about land, water, climate, pollution, and resilience distribute life chances across communities and generations. In plain language, the hidden mechanism is environmental governance and intergenerational duty. This is where politics meets physics. Politics can argue with opinions. Politics cannot argue with physical limits. Budgets can be negotiated. Sea level rise cannot be negotiated away. Narratives can be spun. Drought cannot be spun away. Data can be denied. The consequences still arrive. Environment is not one ministry's issue. It is a national condition linking forests, water, air, soil, food, energy, transport, pollution, and access. Environmental governance begins with evidence. What is happening? What caused it? Who is exposed? What risks are immediate? What risks are cumulative? What uncertainty remains? Evidence does not remove political judgment. It disciplines political judgment. Government may choose among competing paths, but it should not hide costs, silence expertise, or treat physical harm as opinion. Environmental decisions distribute benefits and burdens. A project may create electricity, jobs, transport, or revenue while displacing communities, damaging fisheries, polluting water, destroying forests, or creating debt. The democratic question is not whether development occurs. It is who benefits, who pays, who decides, what alternatives were examined, and what remedy exists when harm occurs. Development can be necessary. But development without evidence, consent, records, and accountability can become a cover for extraction. Environmental and social assessment should happen before irreversible decisions are made. It should examine cumulative impacts, alternatives, affected groups, mitigation, compensation, monitoring, and emergency response. An assessment written after the decision is already fixed is not assessment. It is justification. Participation must be meaningful. Communities need understandable information early enough to influence decisions, with time, access, safety, records, responses, and a genuine possibility of change. Distribution matters because environmental harm is rarely equal. Poor communities often live closer to pollution, flood risk, unsafe waste, deforestation, and weak infrastructure. Those who contribute least to environmental damage may carry the greatest burden. Environmental justice asks whether costs are being transferred onto communities with less political power. It asks whether compensation is fair, whether relocation protects dignity, and whether recovery reaches those most affected. Intergenerational duty extends the same question through time. What benefits do we take today? What costs do we leave tomorrow? What damage can never be reversed? Democracy is not only the rule of the living majority. It is also the duty to protect the unborn. A nation that consumes its future is not sovereign. It is only temporarily powerful. Climate governance has two responsibilities: mitigation and adaptation. Mitigation means reducing the causes of dangerous climate change through energy, transport, land use, industry, agriculture, and forest protection. Adaptation means preparing people and institutions for impacts already occurring or no longer fully avoidable. Flood protection, drought planning, heat action, resilient infrastructure, early warning, crop diversity, water management, and disaster preparedness are forms of adaptation. Resilience is not the ability of citizens to suffer endlessly. Resilience is the capacity of systems to anticipate, absorb, recover, and improve without abandoning the vulnerable. Disaster governance is part of climate governance. Warning must arrive in time, evacuation must be accessible, relief impartial, and recovery must rebuild safety rather than reproduce risk. Public finance also matters. Environmental promises without budgets, staff, monitoring, and enforcement remain symbolic. Climate funds, disaster funds, forest revenue, pollution fees, and infrastructure budgets should create transparent and reviewable records. Polluters should not be allowed to privatize profit while transferring environmental costs to the public. Enforcement is where environmental law becomes real. Licenses need conditions. Conditions need monitoring. Monitoring needs independent evidence. Violations need correction and consequence. A fine that is cheaper than compliance becomes a permission to pollute. Environmental data should be public where safety and privacy allow. Air quality, water quality, emissions, forest loss, license conditions, inspection results, and enforcement actions should be accessible and understandable. Federal democracy adds another layer because rivers, air pollution, forests, and climate disasters cross administrative boundaries. Shared ecosystems require shared rules, coordinated institutions, regional participation, and enforceable common standards. Federalism must not create pollution havens where weaker regions trade away health and land because they lack revenue or bargaining power. Local authority matters because communities understand place. National authority matters because ecological systems cross borders and equal rights must be protected. To understand environment and climate, follow the accountability chain. Authority, duty, record, oversight, answer, correction, consequence. Authority asks who lawfully approved the project, license, extraction, land use change, emission limit, or disaster plan. Duty asks what the ministry, regulator, company, local authority, or emergency institution was required to do. Record asks what evidence should exist: assessments, permits, monitoring data, consultations, inspections, warnings, budgets, or complaints. Oversight asks who can independently examine the evidence and decision. Answer asks who must explain what happened and why. Correction asks what can stop harm, restore land, compensate people, reduce risk, or change policy. Consequence asks what follows when responsibility is deliberately or negligently violated. A broken outcome may begin far upstream. The visible harm may be polluted water, lost forest, flood damage, heat deaths, failed crops, displacement, or toxic air. But the deeper failure may be a hidden license, weak assessment, false data, captured regulator, unfunded resilience plan, ignored warning, or a remedy that exists only on paper. The chain prevents us from reducing environmental failure to one storm, one company, or one official. It identifies where law, evidence, participation, finance, oversight, correction, or enforcement stopped working. When citizens and professionals locate that break, criticism becomes more accurate and reform becomes more practical. For this episode, the principal mechanism is environmental governance and intergenerational duty. The production graphic must make every link readable on a phone screen and label country-specific or proposed arrangements honestly. Under dictatorship, environmental governance is shaped primarily by concentrated command. Information is restricted, institutions answer upward, resource extraction serves protected networks, and challenge may carry personal risk. Nature becomes a silent victim of the same unaccountable power that harms citizens. In a fragile democracy, formal rules may exist while patronage, corruption, weak science, unequal capacity, politicized licenses, or poor enforcement makes protection inconsistent. Assessments may be published but ignored. Communities may be consulted but unheard. Disaster plans may exist without funding. In a functioning federal democracy, authority is distributed, common rights remain enforceable, and legislatures, courts, regulators, local governments, auditors, scientists, media, communities, and citizens can test environmental power. But the label alone proves nothing. The viewer should compare who decides, how authority was obtained, whether records are public, whether affected people participate, and whether independent dispute resolution and remedy exist in practice. A democratic environmental system must be designed, funded, staffed, reviewed, and corrected. The minimum guardrails are: 1. Secure and reviewable land rights. Environmental decisions must respect lawful ownership, customary use, community tenure, notice, compensation, due process, and appeal. 2. Transparent land, water, and resource records. Maps, licenses, concessions, emissions, allocations, monitoring results, contracts, and changes should be accurate, accessible, and open to correction. 3. Environmental and social assessment. Major decisions should evaluate scientific evidence, cumulative risk, alternatives, distribution of costs, climate impact, mitigation, and long-term monitoring. 4. Meaningful community participation. Affected people must receive timely information, safe participation, reasoned responses, and a real opportunity to influence outcomes. 5. Independent dispute resolution and remedy. Courts, regulators, tribunals, ombuds institutions, and complaint bodies need independence, evidence, accessibility, and power to enforce correction. These safeguards work as a system. Land rights without records remain vulnerable. Records without assessment can document harm without preventing it. Assessment without participation can miss lived reality. Participation without safety can expose communities. And remedy without enforcement does not repair harm. Global relevance. Across political labels, ask who controls land, water, energy, pollution, and resilience, what evidence exists, who participates, and whether correction is real. Myanmar relevance. Use ordinary lived experience only where it clarifies the mechanism. Do not treat one authority, project, armed actor, company, community, or proposed arrangement as the whole country. Separate existing institutions from interim systems, local practices, customary arrangements, political commitments, and aspirational federal designs. Here is the civic practice for this episode. See and ask. Identify one local environmental decision whose costs may fall on future generations. Ask who benefits now, who carries risk later, and what damage may be irreversible. Verify. Examine the environmental assessment, scientific evidence, consultation record, license conditions, monitoring data, budget, and enforcement reports. ACT. Create a future generation ledger for one environmental decision. Record present benefits, present costs, future benefits, future costs, affected groups, evidence, uncertainty, monitoring, and remedy. Do not convert the exercise into a public accusation. Review. Record whether you can name the responsible institution, the evidence, the safeguard or remedy, and one safe next step. Where public action is unsafe, complete the exercise privately and preserve no identifying information that could expose another person. Are we a society that can govern itself beyond appetite? The environment is the first classroom where a nation learns humility. Fragile democracy must rebuild trust and resilience, while federal democracy must coordinate duty across regions and protect equal ecological dignity. When we protect the environment, we are not protecting nature as an abstract idea. We are protecting breath, water, food, shelter, health, memory, and the future itself. That is intergenerational duty. That is survival governance. That is the political system at its most sacred responsibility. The principle to carry forward is this. Environmental governance is survival governance because decisions about land, water, climate, pollution, and resilience distribute life chances across communities and generations. Ask yourself, what part of environmental and climate governance have I treated as normal even though it should be visible, answerable, and correctable? Continue the playlist, use the worksheet, and keep the practice safe, truthful, and disciplined. The system shapes our lives. Our participation shapes the system.
Subscribe.
Learn. Participate. Shape the future. KJA. Knowledge justifies authority.